Madam President, we are ready to start. When you are ready, we are live.
All right. I call this meeting of the Vista Unified School District to order at 6 p.m. We will take an attendance first. Trustee Smithfield. Here. Trustee Vargas.
Here.
Trustee Morocco. Here. Trustee Kelly. Here. And I am present. All are present and accounted for. Please stand for the flag salute. Place your right hand over your heart. Ready to begin? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. One nation. Next, we have our land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that the Payom Kawicham, the people of the West, as the traditional land caretakers of the land on which Vista Unified School District was built and its surrounding traditional cultural landscapes. Today, the Payom Kawicham are known as the Luiseño and are made up of 7 bands: La Jolla, Pala, Palma, Pachanga, Rincon, San Luis Rey, and Saboba. We, Vista Unified School District, are mindful of the indigenous peoples in this place, and we pay our respects to the Luiseño, past, present, and future. We are grateful to have the opportunity to be part of this community in the Luiseño territory and to honor their history, culture, and their perseverance of spirit. All right. There were no actions taken in closed session. And next, can I have the approval of the agenda?
I make a motion that we approve our agenda.
I'll second it. Moved by trustee Kelly and seconded by myself. Any further discussion?
Yeah. So I had again asked for an item to be placed on the agenda. And then it was reported back to me from Dr. Doyle that we had some protocol, which I was totally unaware of after 8 years. And when I asked him if he was the one that denied it, he said no, that the president and the vice president did. So it was concerning an email about a child that I did not want to discuss. I wanted to discuss us. So my voice is silent again. Again, I asked for a conversation. Again, I was turned down, which through my investigation is really walking on thin ice because it's happened a lot here. So I understand you get to say what can be on the agenda, but when it's constantly turned down from the same 2 people requesting, it's a pattern and there's something wrong. I don't need a discussion. I needed the people who I represent to know this is happening. Thank you.
All right, we'll take the vote. All in favor of approving the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Any abstentions? The agenda is approved 4-1. Next, we have district announcement by Dr. Doyle.
All right, good evening, board members, members of the public. Welcome to our board meeting on September 12th. I just have a few comments I'd like to make as all of our schools are ramping up for the school year. I'd first like to start with a special thank you to all of our noon duties and our campus security across the district. It goes out to all of them for the great, exceptional support that they have provided during these very, very hot days. Anyone who knows the job of a noon duty and a campus assistant, they are rarely inside. They're outside working very, very hard. So I just wanted to make sure that we acknowledge them and the great work they did, keeping our kids safe in a very difficult environment. So thank you all to them. We finished up all of our back to school nights. Schools welcome students and families back into campus to get a preview of the great learning environment. Teachers and staff had an opportunity to highlight the plans they have for an exciting year of learning. Schools had such a great turnout, many of our schools, that they actually needed to open up some of the playgrounds to fit all the cars and things. So it was a really great opportunity for everyone. I know our teachers and staff worked hard to make that a success. So thank you to all of our teachers and staff for making back to school nights wonderful. Career pathways in our district, our pathways to gainful employment continue to improve and expand across all of our high schools. Just to highlight a few, Trustee Vargas and I were able to visit the new machine learning course pathway at Mission Vista High School. It's amazing. This course is already engaging students in the world of artificial intelligence and how it impacts computer programming. Vista High School's automotive pathway is fully engaging students in learning about hybrid and electric cars, functioning and repairing them. So it's really exciting to see that happen. Trustee Vargas and I, and the President Neufeld from Cal State San Marcos actually co-launched the first dual enrollment program for the county patient care at the Rancho Buena Vista High School. So a huge shout out to Marty Napier. That's our teacher, our Rancho Buena Vista High School teacher, for leading that effort. Next week, September 18th, the Rancho Buena Vista High CTE construction pathway students will be participating in the Tiny House Build Day to support wounded warriors. They're also building their own tiny house on campus to be donated to the Wounded Warrior Project this year. Really exciting. And then finally, we have launched a new communication tool for our community that has been included in our community update. We posted to our website highlights about student achievement aligned to our 3 board goals. The first issue that was published this week highlighted goal number 1, the conditions of learning. We'll be publishing many more issues in the coming weeks and months that will report on goal 2, student engagement, and of course, goal 3, which is academic achievement. Thank you very much, and I'll hand it back to our board president.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is 6, presentation by community members, public comments, community members. Any member of the audience who wishes to hold and speak to an agenda item or at the appropriate time speak to an item not on the agenda should complete a hold card and present it to the board secretary before item 2A or before the meeting begins. In an effort to gain as much public input as possible, individual speakers will be limited to 3 minutes or less. A total of 20 minutes will be held for public comments. We ask that when you come to address the board, that you address the board, and that if you have any extra remarks that exceed the 3 minutes, that you send us the rest of those remarks. So for 6A, we have Sue Martin.
Good evening to the Vista School community. My name is Sue Martin. I'm a retired teacher from Rancho Buena Vista. I see all of our students here tonight and a longtime Vista resident. Tonight, as some of you may already know, I'm going to speak about transparency. This is a word that is often heard in our school district, yet there are many important issues in Vista Unified that definitely lack real transparency. And I'm going to give just a few examples this evening. To start with Rancho Minerva Middle School. Rancho Minerva is one of our newest schools, built in 2007. It is now closed to students. The future use of this school is unclear. What was planned to be the new site for the magnet school, the magnet middle school, Vista, has not happened. Instead, the campus is empty, and the students of Rancho Minerva have been transferred to the 2 non-magnet middle schools of Roosevelt and Madison, exploding their student populations and requiring additional bus routes to be added. Vita students and parents are not clear as to when the site change will occur. And as Vita is a magnet school, the site movement will not decrease the student population at Roosevelt nor Madison. We need to know what happened. Is this poor planning from the district? Delays caused by what? There are plenty of questions that remain unanswered. This is not transparency. My second issue is the district budgeting. Tuesday, I attended a meeting at the district office and was handed a budget summary. This brief outline showed the district's reserve account at $26 million rounded off. The unaudited actuals dated July 1st, 2024, actually show that the district's reserve account is $143.1 million. I need to say that again, $143.1 $0.1 million not being used for our students nor our staff, as teachers once again are buying their own supplies in their classrooms. As high school athletics had their sport budgets cut by 50%. And this district leadership claims that it will be necessary to make $10 million in difficult cuts to the budget this year. All as $143.1 million sits in the reserve account. When I asked at the Tuesday meeting about the $143 million in reserves, Dr. Doyle responded that it was complicated. Indeed, it is. We have $57 million unrestricted dollars in the reserve. We have $86 million restricted. In 2022-23, during COVID, $58,567,494 million was added to the reserves, not spent on COVID.
Now, your time has expired. You can send the rest to the board via email or.
It's immoral.
Next on the agenda,
So can I ask, I can't ask a clarifying question to Dr. Doyle. Sue talked about the movement of the kids going to our two middle schools. Did we ever get everybody enough classrooms at those two campuses?
Yes.
So everybody has their own classroom,
Yes.
nobody's sharing.
No, that you're getting into a topic that would have to be agendized. That
I'm just asking for clarification, yes or no?
students are in classrooms as
That's
appropriate.
not what I asked.
I can't answer any more than that because we have to agendize the topic. And I'm happy to agendize the topic and talk about the status of Roosevelt
Really?
and of Madison.
add it to the next agenda, please. All right, next on the agenda is 7, reports from school-related organizations versus Vista Teachers Association. You'll have 5 minutes.
Good evening, board members, Superintendent Dr. Doyle, Cabinet, and community. VTA is happy to report that we have begun our work with the Rotary Club of Vista to bring opportunities to our students. These projects that are happening this year are the first grade literacy project, leadership, ethics, aspirations, and determination, and that's a camp for 8th graders. RILA, Rotary Youth Club Leadership Award Camp, and that's a camp for 11th graders. An Interact Club is starting at Vista High School this year, and we hope that we can bring this club, which is about community service, to all of our high schools. Model UN is an opportunity that we're gonna have for our alternative high school students this year. And the Rotary District High School Music Competition is coming up later in the year. Our partnership with Rotary has been in place for many years, and it is great to see it expanding opportunities for our students here at Vista. Tonight, you will approve 3 MOUs between VTA and VUSD. One is regarding a $5,000 incentive bonus for our educators with a Mod Severe SPED credential who are currently not in Mod Severe classrooms, to voluntary transfer for 2 years to help the staffing shortage with our Mod Severe SPED teachers. The second is for educators who have completed the VUSD MTSS certification level 1, and they are eligible to do the second performance task, and they will get $1,000 one-time stipend. And the third is an extension of one that has been in place for 2 years. This one is when work is performed by certificated special education unit members providing services for another unit member due to an absence or a leave or increased caseload, which occurs outside the contract day, and it will be voluntary for our teachers. But when fulfilling a request from district administrator, they will be paid the per diem rate for that. Tonight, VTA is advocating for youth sports. As you listen to the presentation of the unaudited actuals versus the estimated actuals, perhaps you consider ways to expand our athletic programs in elementary, middle, and high school. We all know the importance of athletics in building perseverance, just to mention one thing that sports is good for building our students. We are also aware that oftentimes a family's income is the deciding factor if a child can participate in sports. Wouldn't it be spectacular if the USD could invest in our students' futures by offering a way where finances do not impede a child's ability to participate in athletics? Thank you and have a good night.
Thank you, Ms. Avila. Next is 7B, California School Employees Association. Welcome, Ms. Ramos.
Thank you. Good evening, board members, superintendent and cabinet and community. September 30th is International Translation Day. And I just mentioned that because a couple months ago, I was reminded by my colleague who was interpreting for a meeting and said, girl, you were reading that so fast, I couldn't keep up. And I realized we forget that there's an interpreter behind the scenes. And so we're not mindful of when we're speaking that they're trying to keep up with our message. So with that said, I'm trying to improve my CSEA report where I do less reading and more speaking from the heart in the moment. So I do want to start with happy, exciting news, and that's because I want to highlight a very important member of CSEA. Her name is Leticia Ambris. She is the community liaison at Grapevine Elementary School. I'm happy to announce that on September 25th, she's going to receive the 2024 North County Hispanic Heritage Award for Assembly District 74. And this recognition is on behalf of Assemblywoman Lori Davies and local community members. So she's going to be recognized among several community members. And I want to highlight her because this is not just a recognition on behalf of CSEA where it's only member union or union members or the school district. This is a community. And this just comes to show you the importance of our community liaisons. She personally said to me, this came at a perfect time. She said, this validation, this recognition. She's like, I've been going through personal things. If you recall last year, we had community liaisons speak up, or give their report or give the CSEA report to you all. And that's because they want a livable wage. They say, we want to do this forever. This is our vocation. This is this is our calling. But sometimes we're forced to move to another position, not because we feel like we need to be promoted. It's because we have to make more money. But I wish I could stay as a community liaison because it's about the community. So I just want to really highlight her because she exemplifies the ideal individual of working, collaborating, the values of our district and working with our community and families. And so I hope the district can do something for her too, recognize her. And then the other highlight I want to share is I'm happy to say that CSEA is happy to hear that the district is bringing back the 1 day of professional development in January. The last time this happened, I believe it was 2019, pre-COVID or pandemic. So we're really happy because there's benefits to meeting in one location, all of us, an opportunity to interact with each other, where we're not just focused on our site or department, but rather it's the whole district. And so, but I also want to highlight that I know that we mentioned we wanted to be part of the feedback and making suggestions about what type of professional development we want to see. And so district has reached out to CSEA to get feedback from us. So our executive board is working on getting as much feedback from our members so that we can have great attendance come January for PD. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ramos. All right, next on the agenda, we have number 8, board member report outs. Start with trustee Kelly.
No, I don't have any.
Trustee Morocco.
Well, bond meetings and the construction of both years. So those are the main thing because we are starting in a year. I do want to share something with the board and the community, a very happy story, a very happy thing. I got some feedback from a parent about the cell phone restrictions that we have imposed at our middle schools. Her child has had a hard time making friends traditionally throughout his entire academic career. And at the beginning of this year, like the second, third day in, he's bugging his mother, can you hurry and get me to school? Can you hurry and get me to school? And she's finally like, okay, what gives? And he now, as a result of him not having his face in his cell phone, has friends that he eats lunch with every day. And so I just think that that's amazing. And I really, really, really wanted to share that with everyone. I think that's that's a really good thing, so.
It is. Thank you. Trustee Vargas?
Yeah, a lot of things happening, like Dr. Bill mentioned, Cal State San Marcos, Rancho Buena Vista, doing enrollment for, those students, and so the opportunity to get started in a career that is much needed in our community, mental behavioral health. And so, proud of that partnership and what it means for our students at Rancho Buena Vista who are now also Cal State San Marcos students officially. In addition, we attended the Rancho Buena Vista Lowrider Showcase with literature, so thank you to the leadership there for putting that together. There was also a site visit for the current technical education pre-apprenticeship program. So for those students that are part of the any of the CTE courses, if you want to go into construction, we have a pre-apprenticeship program. The first cohort is going to graduate next month, and a good paying job for construction and different careers that people can explore. Additionally, got to visit Mission Vista, got to see some of our counseling department and our teachers there. One of the things that stands out is the robust classes, Mr. Yi providing coding classes, machinery. We know that, AI, artificial intelligence is changing the future. And so glad our students are getting a head start on that and learning how to use that appropriately. Also got to visit Vista High School. The campus continues to excel. I'm happy with the leadership there and the new buildings, the infrastructure that we have invested in our students. And lastly, got to visit a couple other elementaries, Maryland Elementary, Mission Meadows, Breeze Hill, once again, seeing our students in action. And so with, excited to have our students back on campus and excited to see our staff in action.
Trustee Smithfield?
I do. Along with Rena, we got to, I don't know if anybody here went to go over here, but it is down. Will start to come up. So it's been fun watching that and being part of that. Before I get into the other people that I've met with in schools, I want to shine a spotlight on one of our employees, Marie Holtman, who is an IA in this district. And after COVID, her and her husband started a charity, Sleep in Heaven, so they make beds. And any child in this whole county that needs a bed, they make the bed, they get the bedding, and they take it to the house. So they've given, I don't know how many, but anyway, there was a contest, it was a union contest, which they belong to, and they were asking union members, and she won, and her charity won $10,000 to make that many more beds for that many more kids. So you guys need community service, you might want to look into that one, especially you guys in that CTE of construction and stuff. That would be great community service for you guys. And then to see the kids' faces when they get it. So that's very cool. So there, yay, Marie. I've been to many schools, bopping in, just saying welcome back. Trying to touch base with some of the students that I had when they were younger, and I think there might be one right in this front row. So I love Jimmy. Oh, he was such a good kid. Anyway, so I met with many groups of teachers, staff members from different job classifications. They're thrilled to see the kids back. They love you guys. Even though summer's over, they're happy to see your faces again and do the work. There were a few questions that I'll bring tonight, and maybe I'll get an answer. Some I've asked 2 weeks ago, but okay, so one was the middle school classrooms. And then I did hear, did every elementary school get their math curriculum yet? Because they've been Xeroxing it. So I do know 2 schools I went to today. They said they were delivered. They didn't have them. But again, here we are in what we go to school and there's no curriculum. Teachers in the secondary, especially on the other side of town, would like to know why they're being told GLAD is paused. And then they're probably the 2 biggest ones, but another good story. Because you guys listen, because you got to come back to us when you're done. you're learning. I went into the eye doctor the other day, and there was this young kid, he looked like as old as you, and he graduated from Rancho. And now he's an eye doctor, helping the people in his community. It all started here, so you guys bring it back to us and, do good things next year. And I'll grab you, Jimmy, when you're.
You can't escape.
So I visited the pre-apprenticeship program at the Vista Adult School, the classroom setting. And welcomed our new students. And then this past Saturday, I went to the actual hands-on at the welding, at the CTE building at Rancho Buena Vista High, and talked to a lot of our enrollees. They're very happy with the quality of the structure, what they get to do, the hands-on, the equipment. It's amazing. So it was wonderful to see them putting their work, putting their ideas and creating things. And of course, you know, those homes for veterans, that touches my heart as a Marine Corps veteran. I'm wonderfully, I'm just so happy that they're able to give back to people in need, especially our unhoused veterans. So that was great. And I spent some time at the Lowriders in Literacy Festival with a lot of the RBV football team and the speakers. And we had Edward Pizarra with Literacy Starts at Home, and good music, good food, and good times and books. Every lowrider had their favorite book right next to it. So that was a great event. And I hope it's not the last time, because I love to see our culture and everyone's culture reflected in what they're seeing and what they're learning in their schools. So that's wonderful. And that's all.
And almost all of them were graduates of Vista.
Yes,
Vista Hierarchy.
yes, they were. All right. Next, we have number 9, staff committee reports to the board. So we have the Measure LL Micro Bond Workshop. Dr. Locher.
Thank you very much. Wonderful to see everybody this evening. Welcome to our friend.
So we're gonna hear the presentation, then we'll go with questions afterwards, and then we'll go with discussion afterwards, okay? Thank you.
Ready to start?
All right, President Alvarado, Vice President Kelly, and members of the Board of Trustees. It's my pleasure to present to you this evening's micro workshop on Measure LL. As always, we begin with the financials. There is, for the first time in some time coming to you, a significant change in the financial sheet that I would like to point out. The significant change to the financial sheet comes at the bottom. It is in small point font, so I will read it for all of us. That states that total amount for conceptual, ROM, or budgeted, so these are either paid for projects or committed to a future project, that amount now reads almost $240 million. Just as a reminder for our community, Measure LL is a $247 million bond program. That means $240 million is committed at this time. It also means that for some upcoming projects, we're closing some. This number will change as we close those projects, as we start to get money back on some projects. It also means that in the future, although we hold a large amount of money for Measure LL in our bank accounts, we haven't sold all of the bonds for that bank account. So we will have to engage in a discussion as we go through the building of Beaubier about future sales of bonds. So this is the amount committed. It's the first time we have an amount committed that is higher than the amount in the bank account, but we do have a large sum as we close those projects, and we have plenty of money right now in the bank to engage in Beaubier. So just to point that item out. I think Trustee Smithfield put this best, and I will quote her. I wrote down the quote, "Beaubier is down." Except for 2 corners. That is not because we're attempting to claim we're remodeling the school. But I wanted to thank Trustee Smithfield, Trustee Morocco for joining us for those meetings as part of our facility committee. Beaubier is in fact down. The reason why you do see a small corner is they are working on some gas lines and electrical lines in that area, and for safety, they've left those walls up. But these are some of the photos that are examples. However, these projects do change rapidly and quickly. So if you drive by, I happen to go by every other evening to take a look later in the evening. And these photos are no longer current. So the school is fully down except for one quarter, and we are making wonderful progress on that. Now, to advise you of some things that are later on the agenda this evening, there is something on the consent. We do have a revision on the consent calendar to one contract. This is another modification. We continue to close out this process of Vista High School for Building S and Building T. We're going to have more items that we bring to closing out that project, but some of the ancillary contracts to support moving things around and doing things continue to be revised. I understand that we moved some time ago, but things still continue to get shifted around. It's a big deal moving those buildings. So this is for Coravan. It's a modification of about $3,000 on consent calendar. There are two items that are separate action. These are larger items. The first one pertains to Beaubier Elementary School. And if we look at the new contracted amount for this, it's one way to look at it as saying the contracted amount is being changed dramatically. And that is so when you look at the number. But also, I want to remind the board of some time ago, when we started Beaubier, it started as a remodeling of a few buildings. And then it shifted over time to different things. And with each modification, the architect and the firm was asked to go back and to redo the planning over and over again. And now it's a full school reconstruction. So this is the sixth modification to this contract. Now, this is budgeted for in the budget that you already approved. This was anticipated. But the rules and the legality of this is that first you have to approve the GMPs. Then you have to approve the budgeted amount to support the GMPs. Then we can bring this back to you. The amount located in this here, and when we look at it later on the agenda, this is a pre-negotiated amount that was agreed upon. It's on what's called a sliding scale. It's a little hard to read the calculation. I'm going to grant everybody that on the sliding scale, but it states they get a certain percentage of the total project cost based upon this amount or this amount or this amount. But these calculations have been run. This is the revision. This will not be the final revision to any of the contracts associated with this project. And I want to give the board a heads up on that. In fact, the next slide we're going to go to is going to demonstrate that, but we're going to give you the example here that this is the sixth modification. It will be modified at the end of the contract once we know the actual cost. If you recall, within the budget you provided, there's a large amount for contingencies and other items that may not be used. And in that case, there may be a revision later that adjusts this again. This is the case on the second action item. This has to do with Rancho Buena Vista High School Career Technical Education. That scope of the project increased during the time, and therefore the architect contract, in this case, it's modification 4, which is the final, is the normal series. Beaubier being different because of the way it started. In this case, this contract's being modified by $21,000 in an upward fashion to accommodate the fact that the project scope increased, therefore the project cost of construction increased during that due to several modifications that were made. We've seen this on others, and it did seem to be prudent to make those modifications. And in fact, it has been demonstrated that this may save the district money over the long term by touching the blacktop and some of the cemented areas and other things that weren't a part of the scope. So again, back to this evening's action items for consent. The Coravan contract modification, a $3,000 modification, is on the agenda. On separate action, Beaubier Elementary School is up based upon our pre-negotiated rates. Also, RBV Career Technical Education architect contract based upon closing that project out is available. A final note, Ms. Dowler couldn't be with us this evening. She had to tend to something that was urgent. We're wishing her the best. I know she's watching and she's listening, and Chris, we're thinking of you.
All right,
Yep.
trustee Marco, questions?
Well, actually, Dr. Losher, you did a fantastic job of answering the question that I asked during the bond meeting regarding that increase. I just wanted to highlight that that is the reason why one of those increases is so dramatically, it's 40% increase. So you did a great job. I don't even have to ask questions, so thank you.
Trustee Vargas?
Yeah, slide number 2, for the VMMS front entrance, there is about $1 million that are remaining.
Yes.
Are we waiting to write a check or?
We're waiting on several things. So, VMMS is a project that was a project labor agreement. And there was a disagreement. I don't want to call it a dispute because a dispute's a legal term.
Yeah.
There was a disagreement during that project over who qualified for various aspects of the project labor agreements. The Trade Council has been actively engaging with the general contractor. In fact, they just met last night. Correct? Correct. Thank you. Mr. Preciado is with us and he said, they met last night and they anticipate they're going to bring that to a resolution. We're not permitted to close the project out, issue the final checks, and then advise the board of any potential refund on that project or coming in on the final budget costs until that occurs.
Thank you. No further questions?
Trustee Smithfield,
I'm good. Thank you.
trustee Kelly.
I'm also good, thank you.
All right, and now we'll go to feedback. Let's start with trustee Vargas.
Nope.
Trustee Smithfield. Trustee Kelly,
Thank you.
trustee Marco. Nope. And I have none. Thank you,
Thank you.
Dr. Loester.
Don't go too far.
Yes, sir.
Next is 9B, the fiscal outlook 45-day report.
We have it. Thank you very much, Madam President. So I'm presenting to you this evening something that is referred to as the 45-day update for 24-25. And we're going to go through a few steps here, including we have items that are the key provisions in terms of this. Generally, what is been happening at the state level. What did the County Office of Education have to say about our budget? And of course, what is on the horizon? Really, the way I like to think of this report this evening is this is really a forward look on the horizon towards the first interim. And we're going to go over the reasons why here. So first of all, what is the 45-day revision report? Well, it's called for in education code. We're not going to read you the education code. We know everybody has access to it, but the education code 4212H calls for this to occur. And it's actually not a report that's filed with the county. This is actually a report that's made public to the community if we have to change anything. And specifically, it states the key terms, if there's revisions in revenues and expenditures. They're not actually talking about us. They're talking about the state. If the state makes a huge revision to revenues and revenue, how would we deal with that locally? What would be our plan? Oftentimes, and I know many of us remember this, the state comes back after the May revise and they say you have to do your budget, and boy, boards of education, you have to have it filed and everything has to be in order on July 1st, and then they pass the budget 3-4 months later. That's the reason why all of these things happen, is those historic elements to advise the community of those changes. The professional interpretation of this code from legal counsel is that it doesn't require us to do a revision if one hasn't actually occurred. And the determination is the district didn't make any substantive changes because none occurred at the state or county level. So no substantive changes happened at that level. So what does that look like? So the status of the 2024-2025 budget remains the same. We don't have to agree with it. We don't have to think it's a good thing, but we need to report it as it is. The cost of living allocation remains steady at just above 1%. This is below inflationary factors. What does that mean? Things got way more expensive than what they allocated. We don't specify that cost of living allocation, neither the state. That's a calculation that's made. Deferrals have been put in order. Specifically, they call for bracketed deferrals. Now, what does that mean? It means that they take a couple of months and they shift payments over. Well, it means we do get the same amount of money, but this can create cash flow problems. We don't get all of the money up front and expense it. We get payments over the course of the year. And if we don't get payments on time, we're not able to do critical things like make payroll. That's one of the reasons we have items such as reserves for the general funds unrestricted, right? We need to be able to make payroll to keep people paid in a timely fashion and keep all of our bills paid, keep the electricity on, keep the buses. We continued to see, and they didn't change the elimination of those funds, $550 million eliminated for things we hold near and dear to our hearts. Things like preschools, transitional kindergartens, facility grant program was completely eliminated out of this budget. The 2024 budget included several provisions to address chronic absenteeism, but they deferred those to next year. So things that we really care about got deferred or canceled out in this budget. Suspended provisions, I am grateful. After working in many school districts, I'm grateful to work in Vista Unified School District, one of the few districts in this county and in Southern California that issued no layoff notices during this process. Other districts were forced to issue a great deal of layoff notices in order to demonstrate a balanced budget. Here is the thing. We were permitted to do that beyond the deadlines because of the suspension of items within this budget. That was permitted, but we did not enact on that. Additional considerations, the ESSER funds, those shifted from a July 1st ending date, June 30 close. They shifted that over to September 30th. That is going to shift some of the percentages that you're hearing about and used to, because we have to account for those funds differently now in a different year. This is an oddity that happens with some grant funds from time to time. We know this from assets and ACEs and different after-school programs that work on a different calendar year. They did give us an option for an extension, not to spend the money, but to prove that we have expensed it wholly. They gave us an extra 3 months, 120 days for that process. There's additional one-time or limited use funds that also have expired in this with absolutely no indication that they're coming back. So those are the big picture items from the state. On slide 4, I wanted to start with the graphic because we've talked, and I've done my best to simplify our graphics to the extent possible. We've talked about the funding cliffs, and there's various aspects to the funding cliffs. The first aspect to the funding cliff, of course, are funds that are expiring. A second aspect to the funding cliff, of course, are things like costs going up and not being able to make that. But a critical aspect to our funding cliff has to do with 2 factors that are related. And in fact, they're related in a very interesting way. The first is enrollment. How many students are enrolled? We know, though, we don't get paid on enrollment. We're one of only a few states that doesn't occur. We're paid on average daily attendance. That's because people get sick. Students aren't there every day. So we get paid on the actual number, the average daily enrollment. So the blue line is the enrollment, which you can see is dropping down. The orange line is the ADA. Now, ADA is calculated at a specific time of year. So we've done some amazing things. We've had some of the greatest gains in students coming to school. At one point, we hit a high of 96%. However, the state, they only take that measure in what's called period 2. They divide the year into 3 periods. And on P2, they take it, and that's in the middle of cold and flu season. We can speculate why that might be. I'm not going to go into detail, but that is when they take it. And we sit about 93%, typically 92, 93 at that time of year. Now, an interesting thing on the graphic, you don't have to look at specifically the numbers, is you will see a phenomenon that happened during the pandemic. You will see that the orange line and the blue line, they cross. And people have wondered, how is that possible? How is it possible to have higher ADA than you have enrollment? You can never do that. And the answer to that is, during the pandemic, to help school districts, the state of California moved to a new system where they started calculating out a 3-year average of ADA because families weren't really sure what to do. So they were unenrolling their children. And in order to allow for us to deal with that crisis, they crossed things over. So in this case, the orange line did go above for a few years, but you can also see on the average, you can see it starting to fall off steeply again. And that's part of that funding cliff. So the County Office of Education reviewed this in a letter, and they decide whether we get a certified budget. And they have positive certification, they have qualified, the second level, negative. They sent us a letter stating that based upon reviewing our budget, they gave us positive certification. That's a wonderful thing. However, they had a few items that we need to advise the board of. The first is the conclusion of their analysis is, in fact, they believe we can meet all of our obligations for this year. Based upon our reserve and other items, they believe we can meet it this year. However, they wanted to remind us that we must meet an obligation to reduce by first interim our budget by $4.5 million because that is a resolution that the board passed stating that you would. They would not count that $4.5 million towards any potential savings until that is identified. Looks like we have a light out. I'll put in a work order for that. All right. Now, they did have concerns. They made a specific stated concern. Their specific stated concern is that the adopted budget does not demonstrate, I want to repeat, does not demonstrate an ability to meet the multi-year financial projections over time. What does that mean? Well, I won't speak for anybody in the room, but when I do my budget, I do it year by year. That's how I do my family financial budgeting. But for school districts, that's not legal. We have to do a 3-year budget. We can't just look at one, we have to do all 3 years. And in looking at all 3 years, what they're saying is on outlying years, they don't believe we can make all of those obligations based upon not having identified that 4.5 million.
I'm sorry. I'm
No,
not
the
supposed to wait
question's
till the end.
last.
Okay.
Yeah.
okay.
All right. Now, what did this mean from the County Office of Education? They did provide us a future direction. Their future direction was they're going to reevaluate our budget after first interim to determine whether we remain in certification status, that they reserve the right to pull us out of positive certification at that time. We're not permitted to report that 4.5 million until we have an official action item, which we believe we've identified as the CERT, but they will not accept that until the board votes on it in November. So when we look to tonight, we don't have a significant revision for the current budget, but we do have drivers on the horizon for the first interim, because the budget is a process. It's not a one-time event. The interims, first interim and second interim, are check-ins. The county can mandate a third interim check-in if we move into qualified status. They're allowed to do that. But right now, as we look ahead to that first interim, we have some items that we need to keep on the radar for the board. So again, one-time funds, the status is they've expired. There's no indication from the federal or state government that they intend to replenish any of those funds. There are none at this time. We will advise the board of any notification. There is a structured deficit in place. What does that mean? We're currently spending more than we're receiving. That means over time, we've indicated that the amount of reserves we have are going down, and that structured deficit is there. We do have continued declining enrollment, whether you look at it on a yearly basis or that 3-year averaged amount, both indicate a steep decline, which leads to fewer dollars. We do have to revisit board resolution 24/2029 by the first interim to meet our obligation for positive certification. We do have some new things that we're going to look at as we develop the budget and go through, and I wanted to give you a forewarning of this so that way you can begin to think about it. The first is one you've thought about, annual escalation, about 3%. A lot of costs go up every year, about 3%. However, there's a new one that we're coming back to over and over again, and you've seen this as we come to you with contracts. Market factor adjustments. There are some expenses that are going up well over 3%. Think about construction contracts coming to you, other items and commodities that have dramatically increased in cost, 20–30%. We need to start accounting for that because a 3% budgeting adjustment will not take care of those items. They exceed that annual escalation level by a considerable amount. So in order to do prudent budgeting, we have to acknowledge that. The cost of living allocation currently at 1%, they have made future projections that it may go up. Next year, they're looking at a rate that could be 3%. Whether it be 3% or 4%, that's still below inflation and well below market factor adjusted prices. So the bigger message here is, regardless about the amount of money that we may receive through a COLA, it still has less purchasing power available within our budget. And finally, our facility funding, we need to have some considerations there. Regular routine maintenance has been budgeted at about 3%, 3% plus, also for deferred maintenance. However, we've been spending upwards of 10–11%. That's because we've been relying upon one-time funding sources that are expiring. They are not within here. They're not in here. In fact, when we look at the unaudited actuals and we look back and take a look back to January of last year, when we passed the budget with the board, we estimated our carryover or carry forward amount would be as much as 36 or 10 points or over 10%. Our carry forward amount is only projected to be 33 million. It's actually going to be less, under 10%. That's going to have some impacts on things. That's because of a lot of facility projects that came up during the course of the year that couldn't be covered in different ways. We also have general and unforeseen conditions that we need to budget for. For example, If we don't have these one-time funds that we can sort of move around while we wait for insurance cases to settle and other things, we still have to repair classrooms for this year. A good example would be VAPA. At the beginning of the year, pipes burst in the walls. 300 wing was flooded. We have to do an immediate repair because we have to get kids back. We have to get the administration back in the rooms and items. We cannot wait for an insurance settlement to do that. That can take months and months and months. In fact, we can debate with an insurance company who may ultimately decide with us, your pipes are too old to be covered. We don't cover pipes that old, but we have to provide those repair nows, and those are unforeseen conditions that we have to do. And finally, we have to have a discussion about how we want to accommodate the changes that are already occurring regarding facility improvements, including modernization such as the electrification of the fleet. That's not just if we want to put chargers out at schools for the community. That's our entire busing fleet. Right now, we do some charging in-house. We still have to develop the entire charging yard and other items, which can be $3, $4, $5 million projects. So those are the drivers on the horizon. Tonight is not the first interim. It's an opportunity to advise the board that these are some of the items that are coming down the pike as we get to the first interim in December, and we'll have continued updates for the board as we move closer.
Thank you. Questions, trustee Smithfield?
I'm not gonna say a
Trustee
word.
Kelly?
You know my feelings about how we spend money.
Thank you. Dr. Lusher, on slide 4,
Yes,
the
ma'am.
third bullet. I just wanted to clarify, we heard a speaker this evening claim that we are sitting on millions of dollars of unspent money. And one would think that if we can't meet our multi-year financial commitments somewhere, the reserve would factor into that. Can you explain about that, please?
Yeah, so the first thing I want to say, and I mean this in a respectful fashion, and I remain this as a former principal and classroom teacher that is doing this work. This is not easy to read. This is really complicated, and it can be really easy to get lost in these things. How much money we have in the bank, and some of these terms gets really confusing. What is a reserve? What's a required reserve? What are these things? These are all terms that we don't specify locally, and I can certainly understand the confusion. When we talk about something like, well, there's 143 million.1 or something in that neighborhood of money sitting in reserve. Well, that's a combination of funds. That's a combination of restricted funds. So when we get restricted funds, these are funds. In fact, we're going to have this discussion and demonstrate in the unaudited actuals later. You know, restricted funds is about $86 million, almost $87 million in funds for things like community school grants. We have to account for them on the books. It doesn't necessarily mean that's cash in the bank. Also, those are money for specific things. You can't just spend them on anything you want. They have to be spent on the program and service that you accepted those grant or those restricted funds for. So that accounts for some of it. Some of it are other funds, grants for other sources, not necessarily the state or the federal items. All of those constitute the largest portion. The part of when we say the reserve, and we use that term broadly, that can be really confusing. When we talk about the reserve, the important part is to start by dividing our budget, for me, to make sense of it, into the different accounts. We really focus on account 1. That's called the general fund. There are other accounts down the line. But when we talk about the reserve, we're specifically talking about account 1, general fund, which is divided into restricted and unrestricted. The big focus that you need to keep your eye on is the unrestricted reserve. That has a state minimum requirement and policy requirements to hold the minimum amount, but that's where your cash flow comes from for a lot of this, for making payroll and other things. It's also where you can hold money and you can spend it down over time. So it can be really hard to understand, but here's how I try to make sense of it for what it may be worth. When I get my paycheck on the 1st of the month, I've already cut the check for my rent and all my bills. It doesn't mean that my paycheck sitting there on the 1st of the month is how much money I have to spend. To me, that's how much money I got paid on that month. I have to expense out and pay for all these things. At the end of the month, I may have some money left over, but I might not on some months. In some months, I might not have enough. And if I don't have enough, what do? I have to go into my savings because on another month I might have more money to add the savings. Now, if I change jobs, I might not make as much money. That would be a decision I have to make. So if I choose to live in the same place and have the same bills and I don't make as much money, I can choose to go into my savings account. If I go into my savings account, that would be the equivalent of a structured deficit. I'm planning to do it. I plan to spend my savings, and that might hold me for a few years through that deficit while I wait and see if something changes. So it's really complicated, I get it, but that's sort of the picture of how we would go about doing it. It's those factors, the big difference being on the budget that was passed in June of last year. When you look at the deficit, the structured deficit, it does have you on year 3, just above the statement. Why would that matter to us? Because if we continue to have deferrals, then we may be put into a position where we have to make a choice. How do we make payroll if the state's not going to pay us on time? Our option, it's not we don't have any options. Our options is to sell trans, right? Tax revenue anticipation notes, of which we are then billed for doing that, which means we have less money overall. It's like taking your check to a check cashing place and they take a portion of it to give you an account. Then we would have less overall. And that starts a cycle of having less and less and less. And if you can avoid that, it is in the best interest of all the people, because that creates a stability within the school district for keeping people paid and funded and making sure that we don't have to issue layoff notices in order to demonstrate, not necessarily to demonstrate, because some school districts issue those layoffs just to demonstrate financial solvency and then rescind them later. But that creates instability. I'm going to tell you that firsthand because it happened to me 6 different times. It made me change jobs. Did I answer your question, ma'am?
Yes.
Thank you.
Trustee Morocco?
Yeah, on slide 5, under facilities fundings, the last one, modernization such as electrification of fleets. So I understand that that was an example, but using that as an example, isn't there a long-term savings that would be realized by the electrification of our fleet in that we don't have any more petroleum outlays? Things like, I mean, that's out of the fleet, but solar panels, things
Sure.
like that. How does that factor in? How do things like
Sure.
that factor?
Yeah, I would be happy to include some analysis for the board on those items. Because there is still some in-depth things, because that's an excellent point in terms of we do this like we front load LED lights in order to try and get a savings later on. The conundrum you become in is if you don't have enough money to do the actual project up front, you can't get to the savings. So you have to make some difficult choices along the way.
But aren't there modernizations that we have approved in the past that we should be realizing savings now? Does this analysis account for those
Well,
savings?
we have seen, and we'll see in the unaudited actuals, we saw some savings in utility costs, some of that in part because of the rainy season we had, but some of it is based upon LED conversion. The savings is not equivalent to the amount of the project cost, except if you take the long view, which it is the board's prerogative to take the longer view of looking at the project over 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years. So for example, you're going to see utilities and savings costs in the unaudited actuals of about $500,000. And if you multiply that over 10 years, clearly that's $5 million, far less than the cost of replacing the LEDs at $1 million, right? Just after 2-3 years, we see a return, but it won't solve the problem of how do we do it now.
Trustee Vargas?
Yeah, 2 questions. Slide 5, the last bullet point, so regular routine and core maintenance. So we've seen things like, Boulder Elementary collapsed during that rainy season. We've seen the other situations where the internet Wi-Fi cable, the cable has been cut out, and I think that was reimbursed by the contractor. But for the ones that we pay, like what are some examples of like big ones that we had over the last 2 to 3 years?
Yes, I'm going to mention some dreaded words that nobody wants to hear. Mold remediation. We did more mold inspections and remediation than the next 5 districts combined in large districts. We are highly responsive to those items. Those are not items that typically get any form of reimbursement and represent large dollar figure items and don't always qualify for other figures. when we look at major tripping hazards, we've noticed a number of items for playgrounds, cements, and other items that we need to deal with that are fundamental safety items. We've had electrical problems with transformers. We have an electrical project that's currently slated that we are looking at, that is a critical electrical infrastructure project for an elementary school. There are a wide variety that we could report on.
So is your recommendation that we budget like 10% of those if we're spending more on that in like recent times?
My recommendation is likely to be in the first interim, and is likely to reflect the following. 3% is the state recommendation, and 3% is a good recommendation if your average facility age is about 12 to 15 years. Our average facility age is considerably older, and we should budget accordingly. And I'm prepared by the first interim to provide you with some numbers to demonstrate that.
My
One
second
more.
question,
Please. We're gonna let the high
Students, go.
schoolers go, yeah, since it's been an hour and then
Well,
we'll
students,
back to you.
we have a number of people in the back that can help sign for you. Dr. Shakira, wait, so you can take them outside. Take them out to the door. If you want to take a quick break, or do you want to just have that?
You guys want to take a quick break?
You gotta-
It's up to the president.
Okay, so 5-minute break?
Perfect.
5-minute break? We went through questions, now we're gonna have feedback.
And not finish my question.
I am so sorry.
If I may.
I'm sorry. I
You're
didn't-
good. Thank you. Dr. Loescher, thank you for that report. I look forward to getting that analysis on, what you expect and the contingency plan is. My second question is on LAO. Has there been any forecast about this year or the budget that we may get is gonna be? Last year we saw $50 billion in the red for the state. So like, are we projected to continue to be in the red or are we projected to not be positive?
Thank you. So, the LAO will continue to release reports from time to time. As I think we're aware from the budget cycles, they get more accurate the closer we get to it. Most projections are still in red that have come out. Most items, suggest there may be revisions. But at this time, they're not upward revisions. There may be other revisions that are downward revisions,
Do you know when the LA is gonna bring in that first projection? Is it
December.
typically December.
Okay.
Yeah, and that typically it's around the time that boards start contemplating first interims, not always, sometimes it's mid.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and I actually have a question, and maybe it's for Dr. Loescher, no, maybe Dr. Doyle. When was the last time that this district was in qualified versus positive certification?
2019.
That's when I got elected, I see. We had to cut almost 30 million.
19, a little over 19.
It ended up to be 20.
Yes, we had a mid-year cut. That's what
So-
caused it to go up.
Qualified,
So
and
I have a comment. We're going on the comment.
I'm not done yet
Oh.
for my question.
Because we were done.
And what happens when a district is put in a qualified certification?
You're given a time frame by which to demonstrate a balanced multi-year projection budget in order to return to good standing. So you do get some time. Oftentimes, if not almost every time, you're required to provide a third interim, a third check-in on those items. I think, I don't want to infer anything, but I think the question is what happens if you can't leave qualified status? You go to negative certification. At such time, the County Office of Education Board contacts the superintendent of the district to advise as to next steps, which can be a wide variety of next steps, including directives, or to declare the district insolvent. Insolvency is the equivalent of bankruptcy.
Okay, Trustee Smithfield?
Okay, so I was kind of sad to that conversation. I never heard kids materials, kids things and all that. So you had said, well, I wrote it, if you can't avoid that, meaning if you can't avoid I think you were saying that deficit spending. So I've been doing this a long time, well, before I got into these sitting in board meetings and listening to these reports. And you did a really good spin. Because you spun it in a way that we're like, oh, we're gonna be deficit spending. Well, it's deficit budgeting. But we're not gonna fall off the cliff if we spend our money right and put the kids first instead of all this other stuff. But in 2021, at this time, we were told we would have 4 million and some odd dollars in our reserves. Our actions. We actually ended up, the reality wasn't 4 million, it was 18 million. So then we pocketed in our reserves 14 million. In 21-22, the projection was we were gonna be minus 13 million. And guess what? Actually, we got over 29 million. And guess what? The difference was 43, so therefore it went in. Now, yeah, that was the COVID time, so there was more. In 21-22, okay, we're gonna have $1 million extra. That's it, but in actuality, guess how much we had? $58 million. And so we pocketed in that little account, 57 million, that should have been spent on the students, are classified, paying our people so they can live. In 23-24, the projection was, oh, we're gonna be minus 14 million, when in actuality, we got 21 million, and that was an extra 35. So that's the true thing about the reserves, without the spend. Now we're saying we're gonna be minus 30 million. So let's see when the actuals come in, how that works. So that's what I have to say. And again, you will be here. And some of you back there will be up here. I strongly suggest you get away from this nonsense. You have a meeting and you put the kids in the middle, and that's how you make your budget. Thank you.
Trustee Kelly? Feedback? Questions, feedback?
No, I'm all set, thank you.
Trustee Marco?
I agree with trustee Smithfield. Thank you very much for doing that, the numbers.
So again, we're not even
Thank you.
paying for textbooks out of the textbook money like we had asked them to stop doing. We save money there.
Thank you.
Trustee Vargas, feedback?
No further feedback, thank you.
And my feedback would be to, is there some kind of projection or some kind of, account we can put? Not account, but, really budget for those unforeseen construction fiascos that can't be fixed because we didn't have a bond, i.e., sewer backup, mold remediation, where because the cost escalations, like, could we budget more? Could we allocate more for that?
Yes, ma'am. I can present various options during the first interim of what the board is permitted to do. There's usually a budgeting option. Sometimes there are resolution options to specify certain amounts for specific activities. So I would be able to advise by the first interim as to what the board's options were for those various activities.
All right, and was that everybody for feedback? Yes, okay. And so we will have we have the gone limit later on, and we'll have to accept the unaudited actuals and right, okay, thank you.
Those are all
All
agenda.
right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, sure. All right, next on the agenda is the consent calendar. So agenda items 10 to 15, all matters listed on the consent calendar are considered by the board to be routine and will be enacted by the board in one motion. In the form listed below, there will be no discussion on these items prior to the time the board votes on the motion unless members of the board, the staff, or the public request specific items to be discussed and or removed from the consent calendar. The superintendent and staff recommend approval of all the consent calendar items.
I'd like to go on
Okay, what would you like to pull?
15A, please.
15A,
I have 11E.
11E,
I have 15A. Is that what you just?
Yeah, I already pulled that one.
1511.
1511,
Number 15.
15,
Number 11.
their letters, 15,
Okay. 15K,
Okay.
second reading and
Oh,
adoption.
sorry. 15. Oh my gosh, it's now 11.
we have 11E, 15A,
It's the curriculum association and elevation, so that's for elevation. I would like to talk about that.
But I think
That
that's
is under
a,
contract.
that's
Oh, it's
contract.
contract.
that's
Sorry.
a
What is it?
15A.
Oh, it's still 15A. Well,
Yes.
there you go. 15A, and yeah, that's it.
Move to approve the rest of the consent calendar.
so
Second.
moved by trustee Vargas, seconded by trustee Kelly to accept the consent calendar minus 11E and 15A. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll take the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Hi.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, it carries 5-0, the consent calendar, and the first one is 11E.
I'm pulling it up because it's fine.
The board policy.
It's the first reading
Yes.
of, school board policy 4111, but gee, where's the page?
I can put it up on the
It is
screen.
on page 91 in the book,
Okay,
and I should have brought my reading.
I'd like to talk about this policy a little bit. I got
Presentations weren't in the book.
Huh?
The presentations weren't in the book that we talked on there,
You want me to pull it up?
just in case.
You're talking about the-
No, not that part. I'm sorry. There was a document,
The slide deck.
yeah, there's like
Oh,
that.
yeah, so you have to give it. We'll pull it up in a moment.
Just in case.
Start.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. All right, so when I'm reading this, I get to the second paragraph and it's, the superintendent or designee shall develop fair, open and transparent recruitment and selection process and procedures, which will ensure individuals that employees are selected for employment in the district, race, blah, blah, blah. So it's not that I'm asking to change. I don't think I'm wording there, but I've known some extremely qualified, excellent teachers that I've taught that could teach circles around a lot of people.
Mhm.
And they left the district for different things like child. And they were not aware, neither were we, that if they didn't just automatically, without being asked, to have a principal recommendation on their applications were being tossed. And they were not getting called in for interviews. Are you gonna look at me like you never heard of it?
No.
You did, you've heard it.
I'm not quite sure who are you talking about? You said
Well, I was
qualified,
talking about.
qualified
this
teachers
one.
that left the
So,
district?
no, I'm just talking about when applications come in.
Mhm.
They want to apply for a job here,
Mhm.
that we have plenty of. They're tossing them if there's not a principal's recommendation, but they were never asked to attach a principal's recommendation.
So that would not be
So what I'm saying
required.
is, we're not looking at all the applications to get the best applicant, okay? And then my next question was, not the paragraph after that, but the next one, when vacancy occurs, they shall review as appropriate the job description for the position to ensure that is accurate of the major functions,
Mhm.
right? So we've had come to us. I can think of two incidents of people that were hired to do a certain job and then just midstream it was changed without anybody in the administrative just goes, oh, you're not doing that anymore, you're doing this. So do we not have this in the policy, what they get hired for?
Are you referring to resource teachers?
No,
So there are general job descriptions. We have general classroom teacher. We have education specialist. It's broken down a few. There's very few actual job descriptions for certificated staff.
well,
So I
there
just
are
need to
some
know
at our
which one.
secondary level
Mhm.
that they have to go in and do different things, whatever it is, and, for instance, the one right now, but I know there's more, pops it in my mind, we did discuss it last year, there was a complaint filed because they were hired for this. And then the admin just said, no, you're not doing that anymore, they wouldn't have applied for that job if it was gonna get changed. So I just think and then we let them go and we don't try to fix it. So when we have this in the policy, we have to make sure that
Sure.
we.
I'm just
stick
not sure what you're referring to on that specific example.
Well, I can share with you after
Sure,
this.
that sounds good.
Exactly who it
Yeah.
was. Okay, and then, when posting the pay scale, so let's get into the pay scale,
Mhm.
because it talks about it in several places. Regular, not a teacher, I've taught this many years,
Mhm.
but we've been screening for other positions like, SLPs.
Mhm.
Okay, because that's actually the one I'm talking to. So you get an SLP that wants to try out the school district. They've been an SLP for years and years and years,
Mhm.
and we start them at square one. Those salaries should be negotiated. If they've been an SLP in the hospital or a home care setting for 20-some years, and we're starting them on year one, that's why we don't have any SLP.
I don't believe that's accurate. I believe
do,
they
'cause
get
I
the
can
same, they
give-
can go up to 10 years.
I can give you the name. And it
Okay.
wasn't
We'll
negotiated.
go after.
And there was like, nope, no conversation, we don't talk about that. And you can even touch base with the person, because
Sure.
that's exactly how they were treated. So when I come to this one, there was just so many red flags on how we do things. The other thing is you used to give out these cards for classified jobs. And I you would give me millions of them. And I would give them out at dismissal. I would talk to these people who think I'm crazy. Oh, you need a job. And at every school event, carnival. And then they would come back to me and say, you know, I applied for a job and the district never got back to me. And that's time and time again. Like, I'm begging them to apply a job in our district and they apply and then don't hear anything after the fact. So that's why I pulled that, because I wanted to talk.
Any other further questions or comments on the policy 4111?
It's first reading, so.
First reading. All right, so we still have to make a motion to accept the first reading. All right, can I get a
The
motion?
motion to accept the first reading of recruiting and selection.
Moved by trustee Smithfield, seconded by trustee Morocco. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll take the vote. All in favor of approving the first reading of board policy 4111. 11E, say aye. 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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? 11E is approved. Next is 15A.
Okay. I got, okay, awesome. Okay, so I've, the first one that I have a question on is item number 5, that's CAPE.
Mhm.
High school ELA assessment platform for the 24-25 school year. Do we have any data on the efficacy of this program?
My understanding, the information I received is that this was the one that the teachers requested.
Okay.
They need some type of assessment, and I believe there was an SIR
That's all right.
that
So-
is no longer available, so they needed some type of assessment. And I was told that the teachers requested that.
All right, thank you. That was my question. This next one is, this turn it in.
Turn it in.
Yeah, turn it in, okay.
What
Subs-
number is that?
That's number 6. Subscription to, helps for students. Okay, is this another one that the teachers
Yeah, it's a
requested?
teacher.
It's the teacher and it's for plagiarism.
For
It's to
plagiarism?
identify plagiarism.
Oh, okay, great. Oh, you mean for
It's
like
an active
AI?
For a teacher to be able to, anything, just for a teacher to be able to use that to identify if there's plagiarism in any type of work.
Awesome, I like that. Okay, thank you. Number 7 is one that I have some concerns about. This is the equity. For one thing, I've only been invited on one equity walk since I've been on the board. And I'm wondering, what's the goal of using this consulting firm? What is the goal?
Yeah, I could probably take that. So, Nicole Anderson's been with us for a number of years, and the goal of it is to continue to deepen the implementation of our board policy on equity.
Okay, for what
Yes.
purpose?
For the purpose of deepening the implementation of the elements, there are 9, the board policy on equity. This is a smaller contract than she's had in the past, and we anticipate that this would be the last year. She assists with our equity committee. She also assists with the development of the equity box. And she also meets with, does professional development with all of our administrators. So this is a reduced contract to address those elements in our equity board policy.
Okay, because you know what I got here
Um,
is the dashboard.
Yeah,
Okay, and when I look at
previous years, yeah.
the previous, the scores, okay, I see declines. I see small gains for the African American students, yay, I love that. But that's just a fraction of our students that are, Title I students. And I have concerns about, we have this policy, we've been using this consultant for some time. And I just don't see us moving in the right direction, so those are my concerns.
We'd be more than happy to do a presentation if the board chooses for us to give you more detailed information about the progress we've made with the implementation of our equity board policy.
So I would like to talk on that progress. Because through our training and through her training, we were told many times that equity is for all children, all children. But this board does not practice that. And we never evaluate ourselves. And I'll give you the last example. When I bought up ETK, and that one little group that just for 1 year is affected, across the board, both Martha and Cipriano asked about one group of kids only. One group of kids, that's not equity. So we are not doing a good job because it's a well-known fact that the poor have all kinds of resources, which you shared that night, and the rich can pay, but the middle class cannot afford childcare. And not one person cared about that except for me. So we are failing in equity because we should be looking at every single decision we make and how it affects every last child in this district. And we don't do that most of the time. Like my 2 cents on that. And that's good for the last one. And then
The next one, which one is the next one? I'm
the
sorry.
next one is curriculum. Is that
No,
you?
it's me. No, I have a
Okay,
few
I'm
more. I have a
sorry.
few.
I mean, that-
8, I have a question about this dunk tank marketing. Which board goal does this fulfill?
This was a request by the board back in December to increase our access and coverage in the media. And we've increased it dramatically. We actually gave a presentation to the board.
That wasn't my question. My question is, which board goal does this meet? Does
It
this
addresses
fulfill?
all three. Because all the different coverages address different aspects of student achievement and growth over time.
Okay, so this is benefiting our students and their academic achievements?
It's benefiting our community by informing them of what's happening in our school district. If that's your question.
No, that's not my question. My question is, how is this benefiting, helping our students get better academic outcomes?
Well, again, my answer to you is, it's a communication tool that assists us to access more communication within our community.
I think $75,000 is not being spent on our students, and so I have a strong feeling about that. I don't know if anybody else wants to speak to it, but I'm ready to move on. Number 9, I have gotten a lot of feedback from teachers and actually parents too about maps. So there seems to be 2 programs, iReady and this maps, okay? I don't know why we need 2. I've heard really positive things about iReady. I mean, from, like I said, parents and teachers, that seems to be more positive, but is positively received. So are we gonna continue with having both iReady and maps, or are we gonna choose one?
I can address this item right here for
Okay.
this cost. This is Vista High School that's piloting maps for math. So that's the cost of this one.
Okay, and this was the one that I think we got a copy of the contract, correct?
No,
No?
That was the
that's
previous
for the
year.
assessment for the elementary. which
Okay, all right.
They went through training and they still don't know how to use it and they couldn't get on it to do the testing.
Okay.
And we were misled because we were told from that podium that it was a pilot for
Gotcha.
$100,000 and it's not.
Okay, so my mistake, I
So
was
we were
confused.
misled.
But for
Okay.
this one, it's Vista High School pilot
Okay.
math and it is tied to their WAS.
Okay, very good. And the teachers are on board with this.
It's a part of their WASC
Yeah.
implementation.
Okay, thank you. And then I think I only have one more. And then I believe trustee Smithfield has some.
I just don't know.
Okay. It's number 93, the Resolve Math Study. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? That seems that I'm interested in. Conduct a study to provide evidence regarding the most efficient instructional approach to help students succeed in math.
Item 93?
93,
93
It's not an
is,
expense.
I can.
Go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, so I'd be happy to provide that. That's a revenue grant source. So we did implement iReady,
it's 92.
sorry,
Oh, no, it's
93.
93, never mind.
Pardon.
Forgot
So
we
we
were-
did implement iReady, and this particular study was made available as a grant source to offset the cost of that, to study the effectiveness of the implementation of iReady and the math scores. So it's actually helping the district in that process. So it's receiving the funds to pay for the tests.
I really like that. So thank you.
You finished?
I am done.
Okay, so I have 11 curriculum associates, renewal of elevation, student licenses, and literally before this year, I maybe have heard of this, but not now, but I have. You have upset teachers. Because they're confused and they don't know, and some of them feel at Vista High, that they're being asked to do something with the program that it wasn't meant for, and they don't truly get it. And that when they are reaching out to say, I need GLAD strategies, help in my classroom, they're being told they have to do elevation. So I did check with the GLAD person, and she said she was asked to commingle them, which they don't commingle, and if we understood the programs that we're in charge of, we would know they don't commingle. So, I see this money and I kind of want to know what exactly do we use this program for,
So this is for our English learners.
right?
I
knew
know
that.
we have a few people. Do you want to talk more about elevation?
I can talk about elevation.
Okay. Sorry, I can't answer that one, but I can't have that expertise on it.
Hello. Elevation is the monitoring tool that we use to make sure that our English learners are making progress. That's part of what we use elevation for. There's also strategies and modules that teachers can go through to learn more about how to support their English learners. Elevation differentiates the supports that teachers could give to particular groups of students. So the emerging English learners, it will recommend you can try these strategies and supports for those students and for your learners that have a little bit more English
So are we
proficiency.
doing GLAD for that, or are we doing elevation for that? I get the monitoring system, but what you're telling me, and if you're trying to integrate them, they don't. The
There's-
chart in elevation is not the chart, or even supposed to be used the same with GLAD. So you can't intermingle, but so what you're telling me what it does is the strategies that we found and it said to do in the classrooms for our ELs, because the success is proven. We've been using elevation for years and we don't have progress. So we're spending money for this, which is fine if it's for the monitoring, but we gotta get our act together. It's either GLAD or it's elevation, and elevation has not worked, and our act is not together. And I'm hearing from them, but I'm not gonna be here soon. So I'm gonna start telling them to come up to the microphone.
Thank you.
I just want to be clear that the primary purpose of elevation is for reclassification.
It's for reclassification.
So we need a
But
tool.
that's
for
not what they're being
I-
told to use it for.
I made notes of what you're saying and we will check into it. I just want to make sure the board's
People are
clear.
dying.
The primary purpose of elevation is the tool so we can follow an appropriate process for reclassification.
Thank you.
I have notes of your feedback and we
And I
appreciate it.
have no problem using it for monitoring, but we cannot confuse. it.
I have your feedback and we will follow up. Trustees, nothing.
Right, any more?
Now I'm done. That's it. Thank you. I recommend that you do that. Make a
Make a
motion.
motion
Well,
to,
Go ahead. make a motion.
Well, what I was thinking is, I have a couple that I have misgivings that I don't want to approve, so I will make a motion to approve 15A, excluding the Nicole Anderson and Associates Consulting Group and the Dunk Tank Marketing. And then we can vote on the separate list.
so moved.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? Well, I disagree, completely on, saying that we don't need a person to help us with the equity work. We're trying to correct things that have been inequitable for hundreds of years, decades. That can't be fixed in a year or two or three. And so, you know, as we build capacity, and this is the last year, we need to make sure that everyone is comfortable doing these equity walks in our schools, that we can see examples of equity in every classroom, in the curriculum, and what the students are learning. So I would not be in favor of approving these, this 15 minus Nicole Anderson, or for that matter, the Dunk Tank marketing, because that was a directive we gave Dr. Doyle to get more publicity on the great things that are happening in Vista Unified. Any further discussion?
Do we need a motion to
No,
approve?
there's a motion.
You just call the vote.
You just call the vote.
Die if it doesn't.
All in favor of approving 15 minus,
7 and 8.
number 7 and number 8? Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay,
Nay. Motion dies.
I make a motion to approve 15A.
Moved by trustee Vargas, seconded by trustee Kelly. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll call the vote. All in favor of approving 15, A, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Right. 15A
Really
is,
disrespectful. I just want to say it's very
15A
disrespectful. You
is
still could
approved.
approve those.
Right, next on the agenda are our action items.
Thanks, President.
Okay, 16A, ratify and approve purchase orders.
Oh, I make a motion to approve 16.
So moved. I'll second it. Any further discussion?
Yes, I have a question. Where is it documented, like bank fees, where our late fees are? Where would I find that?
That would not be in our purchase orders, but that would be a separate documentation. We could provide that to the board.
Okay, so I would like that to go back a while, over a year, or bank statements with all of our late charges
And interest.
and interest.
Any further discussion on 16A? Seeing none, we'll call the vote. All in favor of approving 16A, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Any abstentions?
I will be doing, I'm sorry,
Approving.
Yeah, I am not doing purchase orders, no.
No.
All in favor, I'm gonna call the vote again. All in favor of approving 16A, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Okay. 16A is approved, 3-2. Next is 16B, approve the 2023-24 report of the unaudited actuals and ending fund balance as presented.
Give me 1 second.
Yes. Thank you very much, President Alvarado, Vice President Kelly, and all members of the Board of Trustees. We have this evening the 2023-2024 unaudited actuals. And for this presentation, joining this evening is Ms. Ana Machado, our Executive Director of Financial Services. Her and her team were providing all of the reports on these items for the last several weeks, so we thank you for that. Again, a similar format that we used for the 45 days, we're going to start with a brief overview. Where is it called for, the unaudited actuals, and what are the requirements? This is an education code, section 42100. It calls for us to submit these by September 15th of each year to the San Diego County Superintendent of Schools for their review. It's to provide an overview of the district financial status as of June 30th, 2024, and serve as a primary financial status. Now, why is it called the unaudited actuals? We have an independent auditor. It's not just the county, an independent auditor that reviews all of these items and may come back with additional recommendations. A few additional considerations. The language that's being used in these documents are federal standards that are called for. We are required to use that language. The reports you see are being generated off of the online computer system. I do want to put a caveat to the online computer system. It is a computer system. It is being constantly updated, including today, which means all the numbers are being presented. And it does round numbers. And sometimes it has some rounding numbers, rounding errors from time to time, up and down. But that is something that's out there. So we will be using our object and functions per Gatsby 34 requirements. It's a federal standard. And the additional consideration is this also considers the passage of the GAN limit. And, you know, again, what is that GAN limit? We will see that later on this evening. This actually started in 1979 as a requirement, and it calls for a specific government funding level to be approved every year for all governmental agencies. So we'll get into that a little bit later on. A quick summary of the findings as we move through this. The staff is recommending that the board approve these unaudited actuals. Factually, you're not simply approving, you're approving that you received them for turning into the county. The restricted resources, this is the biggest picture item, is that we've maximized the use of all funds. They're all committed for restricted resources. This is a major accomplishment. The unrestricted resources, well, we're positioned to support a structured deficit strategy. What does a structured deficit mean? Again, I want to use the specific financial term, a structured deficit. It's not spending. It means in the budgeting strategy, the structured deficit indicates we would have more money leaving us than coming in. So over time, we should see changes in that. And that's what that demonstrates. The carry forward amount is approximately 2% comprised of a theoretical and factual amounts. Now, what do I mean by theoretical and factual amounts? So we broke it down. That 2% of the unrestricted equates to about $7.6 million of all of that amount. 1.7 million of that is called fair market adjustment. That's an assessment of the total value of the district. It's not cash on hand. We have to account for it, but it's an amount we're informed of. $2.7 million is funds that moved out of the unrestricted to the restricted side of the house based upon realizing the maximization of those resources, looking at what we could do to use all of those resources that we would have to send back otherwise. $1.5 million represents interest. We have bank accounts, we earn interest. We may have noticed that interest rates are higher, so we had a higher interest rate return. It's been for some people a difficult financial year. Some people have played the lottery a lot. We got extra lottery funds that came in that we didn't know about that. Other cost savings are about $0.5 million. And that's part of what we're going to be reviewing this evening. Now, this overview report is just that, an overview. We do something that is also included in the board items. We include all 125 pages at about 6-point font of all of the financial items for the public to review. So that way that is available for them. First up on slide 4 is the restricted general fund audited actuals. We need to do something called a restatement. That's an adjustment to the start of the beginning balance. That's indicated on your left side of the screen of $30,000. We had some revenue adjustments. What does that mean? Well, we talked about an amount that's called the restricted carryover amount, this amount of $86 million. These are funds and grants from restricted resources coming to us that have to be expensed over years. So we can thank Community Schools Cohort 2, went from $5 million to $14 million. Now, this has been cost adjusted because we're still waiting to hear back from the state regarding Rancho Minerva and Beaumont Elementary. So we did not include those funds in the assumptions that they're there. So this amount accounts for that. Teacher retirement fund, we had a cost savings. The market turned out to be better than what they projected. So rather than having to contribute 14 million, we were down to 11. And deferrals from federal sources, we were able to move $1.5 million. Contributions from special education, we wanted to thank our team in special education for working so closely with the financial management team for maximizing those funds and finding a way that we could reduce the impact on the general fund unrestricted. The next slide up as an overview are the unrestricted. If you recall earlier this evening, we said Fund 1 is the account that we pay attention to specifically because this is the one that has the highest impact to all of that certification. This is the part where we talk about reserves and those items. When we look at the revenues, we did see the revenues that we indicated at the beginning, those fair market values, which is not money in the bank. It's a theoretical amount. The interest from revenues, the lottery amount. For expenditures, we did see savings in utilities. This is a variety of factors, but we did implement some programs that saw some savings. We did see a decrease in hourly amounts and hourly amounts being paid to people. We saw material and supply costs not coming in as high. Those equated to about $500,000 overall. Contributions, the use of those federal SPED dollars for carryovers from prior years were able to be utilized in this. Now, I think the biggest thing that my takeaway was from this slide as we look down the line is the total required reserve, okay, in this fund. I want to be specific because this gets really sort of confusing. That's not the base specified by the state. This is a term we have to use. This actually comes in below the budgeted projection that was given in June because of additional costs that were in there. The original amount was closer to 37 million. This is down now to 33.6 million, 33.7 million in that respective reserves. That's where you get all of these differences and adjustments. Looking at slide 6 from the findings from the team is the combination of those items. And when you look at the combination of those items, you see a variety of numbers. You see an ending balance, but also you see the total required reserves. Those reserves, again, at the bottom, not the 143.1 of an ending balance, it's the total required reserve that if you start deducting, again, budgeted amounts, theoretical amounts, not necessarily cash on hand amounts. Those are the amounts that we're going to review on the next sheet of the restricted funding amounts you have to carry forward that there's plans for over time, plus the addition of that general fund unrestricted reserve that we do have plans according to the approved plan to spend down over the 3-year budget cycle. And what does that $86 million look like? Again, we break this down on slide 7 for you. $86 million broken down the line. You will see a large number of larger items, the Community School Partnership Act, 14 million, expanded learning opportunities, but there are already plans in place for these over time. So these aren't funds that we can spend any way we want. There are restrictions on them, and there are plans in place over time, and they must be spent for those specific purposes that qualify. Finally, as we look down the line on items, we're going to see some shifts as we move from year to year. Now, the shifts reflect what are in the budget books and what are found in the unaudited actuals. On slide 8, you're going to see a few stats and figures. We break this down by object and code. And when we break it down by object, we're talking about things like salaries, benefits, other services, things of this, broad categories. When we look at this, last year, we find that salaries and benefits represented 85% of the GFU. So the general fund unrestricted, 85%. Back when I went to administrative financial training school, they informed us anytime you go over 80% on that amount, you need to consider your financial health. That's simply what I was informed in school. When we look back at the 45-day, looking back, you would have noticed that number was 89%. And that number will shift with these funds that shifted over to September 30th for reporting. We would anticipate that number may go up to 90, 91, 92%. We'll have to see where those numbers fall as we make those shifts. Again, we have those one-time dollars that are being expensed, and we have reduced capital investments. We break it down a second way to you in terms of by function. By function are things like instructions, ancillary services, these sorts of items. Where you break it down by those codes that are called for within the accounting principles as required by the state, 85% of those items qualify as being labeled direct services to students. One-time funds allowed for needed plant maintenance for 2023 and 2024 are also considered in these. And again, those are going to shift over time. Those are not the only fund accounts, and we want to be clear about that. That is the one that is the most specific look. We do have some findings across the accounts. We know we have cafeteria funds. We have various other funds that are available, student activity funds. All of these various funds all have specified uses. The big picture on the reports here are some shifts across the various funds. Also to know that some of these funds, they don't appear ever in our bank. Some of these are held by county treasury or other entities. We just have to reflect them as part of accounting for items. So when we look at this, we looked at the specialized use of all of these. We looked first at Fund 35. On Fund 35, you're going to notice it's the only fund that's marked in the negative. It's right in the center of the page. It's marked in the negative because a similar fair market value shift that shifts the funds from one side of the house to the other, it actually moves over to Fund 40. So it improves Fund 40. It just shifts the fund over, which changes sort of how you can use a few things. And then, of course, Fund 51 of about 19.3 million, 19.4 million. We don't ever see any of that. That sits in county treasury altogether. We just want to point that out. That is cash sitting with the treasury. But those are the findings and a summary of the 125 pages of the SACS report and our presentation to you this evening. We're here to answer any specific questions that you may have, or to take questions that we may not have answers to at this moment for review and for getting back to you. This is part of the unaudited actual process. We plan to turn this in tomorrow, which is by the deadline, because you clearly can't turn it in on Sunday. So we do plan to turn it in tomorrow. And later on this evening, you will have the GAN limit that you need to pass in conjunction with this in order to make that a final report. So that concludes our overview.
Questions, trustee Kelly?
None, thank you.
Trustee Morocco?
Yep.
Trustee Vargas?
Yeah, you mentioned it earlier, so in November, we'll get the early retirement incentive, the analysis. In the case that we don't have enough staff that choose to opt in, or in the case that the board decides not to move forward, we have to identify $5 million in budget solutions, correct?
To be specific, the board resolution called that the board would find $4.5 million by the first interim. We will present what comes in for that early retirement program. The board will have the option to accept or reject that at that time. The board, if it accepts it and it comes below projections, whatever amount is left, we would have until the first interim to find those savings. If it came above, we would have until the first interim to report what we might want to do with all of that, or how we project that would be out. What's critical is those savings are for future years. So we still are in the structured deficit for this year. This is a future year item, but we have to make a statement by first interim because they will reevaluate us for certification status.
Got it. Dr. O, could you go to slide 7?
Sure.
So this is the restricted carryover. And so some of these, you know, the big ones, ELO, the community schools grant and the emergency block grant, do any of these have expiration dates?
You want to speak to that?
Absolutely. So the LLP has become an ongoing funding source. And the carryover represents 1 year of the funding source. What it means to us is that whatever we didn't spend last year, we'll need to spend this year. And so it's a 2-year expiration date. Other funds like the Learning Economic Recovery, that one expires in 2028. And other funds like the community schools is a 5-year plan. We are now on cohort 2 that started last year, hence the big ending balance.
We'd be happy to break this down for the trustees and provide an expiration date of each one.
And based on past practices for our district, the ESSER funds and all the COVID funds, did we at any point in that time not exhaust it or too many back to the federal government?
I would go back for a detailed report because I was not here for the votes for ESSER 1 and 2. For current ESSER 3, which is up for expiration on September 30th, we are currently planning to expense all of those funds, in particular on a focused project regarding indoor air quality that it qualifies for. But we'd be happy to go back and look at ESSER 1, ESSER 2, and also we can provide additional reports on those items.
Then going back to the ELO funding, like this is, I think, one opportunity that we can engage our staff. And so with that, Dr. Joe, not sure what the current communication is in the outreach, but if there's opportunities to continue to add more programming for our students, I think this would be one that, you know, could benefit our students and staff.
Trustee Smithfield?
We're just voting to say we got this, right?
Yes.
That's right.
All right, feedback?
Or,
We did question. You want feedback? Anyone want feedback for the unaudited actual? All right, seeing none. I need a motion to approve the report on the unaudited actuals and ending fund balance as presented.
so moved.
Second.
Moved by trustee Kelly, seconded by trustee Vargas. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of approving 16B, say aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
Any abstentions? All right, 16B passes 4-1. Next is 16C, Rancho Buena Vista Career Technical Education Architect of Record Contract Modification.
Thank you very much, President Alvarado, and to all of the members of the board of trustees. This was covered earlier during the Measure LL presentation. This is the adjustment for the architecture contract as part of the closeout of Rancho Buena Vista High School Career
I
Technical
move that
Education.
we approve item 16C.
Second.
Any further discussion on 16C? Questions? Seeing none, all in favor of approving 16C, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And abstentions? All right, 16C passes 5-0. Next is 16D, Bobier Elementary Reconstruction Architect of Record Modification.
I move that we approve 16D.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll call the vote. All in favor of approving 16D, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? 16D passes 5-0. Next is 16E, approve resolution 25-05, authorizing the use of the CMA's contract.
I move that we approve item 16E.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll call the vote. All in favor of approving 16E, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? 16E passes 5-0. Next is 16F. That is approve the resolution 25-06 regarding appropriation subject to the GAN limit in accordance with the applicable constitutional and statutory law. Mouthful.
I'll make a motion to approve item 16F.
Moved by trustee Kelly. I'll second it. Any further discussion on approving 16F? Seeing none, we'll call the vote. All in favor of approving 16F, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Any abstentions? 16F passes 4-1. Next is 16G, approve the MOU between Vista Unified School District and the Vista Teachers Association regarding incentive for specific educational specialist position.
I move that we approve 16G.
Second.
Any further discussion on 16G?
Yeah. Give me a little.
Sure.
In a nutshell.
So in the strategy 5 of the LCAP, we've identified chunks of money for incentives for hard to fill positions. In the past, they've been different positions. This year it was mod severe. It was getting very competitive. So we wanted to throw out an incentive out there. It's just that piece.
Okay.
Yeah,
It's just one time.
it's just a one time, well, actually, this one is gonna be over a 2-year period. So 2,500 this year, 2,500 next year.
All right, hold on, I lost track.
Second.
Okay,
The motion on the floor.
motion by trustee Morocco, seconded by trustee Vargas. All in favor of approving 16G, say aye. Any opposed? All right, 16G passes 5-0, and I'm gonna ask that they present it first before we make a motion, whatever they have to say, because there might be things that are relevant and we're like just jumping to it before.
Well, that's
they
all
make
right.
sense.
Sorry, I assumed that everybody came to the meeting prepared and read this stuff before we came in.
16H,
This is an MOU between the district and Vista Teachers Association regarding another level of an MTSS certification. So we have certification pathways that we're working with our EE&I department. And so many teachers did a level 1 where they worked hourly, they worked through different professional development, and now they get to do a performance task and receive $1,000.
I move that we approve 16H.
moved by trustee Morocco. So moved. Seconded by trustee Smithfield. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll call the vote. All in favor of approving 15H, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? 15H passes 5-0. Next is 16I, approve the MOU between Vista Unified School District and the Vista Teachers Association regarding service provider coverage compensation.
So each year, our special education department as far as teachers, speech pathologists, psychologists. We have sometimes vacancies, we have sometimes leaves. And so this changes the compensation in the contract to per diem versus just hourly as we kind of transition into filling vacancies, but also covering leaves. It's an incentive to cover those, the student services.
I move that we approve 16I.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by trustee Morocco, seconded by trustee Smithfield. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll call the vote. All in favor of approving 15I, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, 15I is approved, 5-0. The next is 17, which is continuation items, but there was only one speaker, so that is not necessary. And then 18, board business. Earlier, there was a request to get a report on what the status of Vita moving and the status of the schools that the kids were
Use of
transferred to.
classroom, use of classroom.
Use of classroom. Anything else?
I have like 5 things here. I don't think they need to be agendized. A few of them I've asked questions 2 weeks ago. I haven't gotten answers. I was told they would be on the Friday letter in 2 weeks. I said, that's too long. I need the answers prior to that. I still to receive any answers. So there are a few things I think we need to talk about. I think we've all gotten the emails. I would like to talk about the person who had to leave the district for military. Our HR did not work with her at the time because I was the union person. And she
Trustee-
has,
Trustee Smithfield?
I'm gonna, if it needs to be on the agenda. I'm explaining the situation, Martha, let me finish. If it needs to be on the agenda, I would like it on the agenda. Or is it something that we can
No,
work out?
I think that if we're talking about like a specific person, those are like confidential matters with employees. And so that would be something,
Well, no, this is really something that the board has to make, because first she was told it was Par's responsibility. Par says, no, it was Rachel's, and Rachel said it was the board's, and then Rachel said it was curriculum, and this poor person is hanging in limbo, so we haven't had a discussion, and it is a board's decision.
right, I understand that. I'm just trying to figure out if that's a better conversation for closed session versus open session.
Either which way,
So,
it can be
okay.
on close.
So that's,
just on
yeah,
the
so,
agenda.
yes, we'll find out.
The other one is, that's a comment. Our curriculum materials for our DLI classrooms, for instance, they have core training, but there's no core Spanish trainer, and the core people said they're looking for it. So we're making these teachers sit through the English, and they really need the Spanish. So I would like to get an update on that. And I would also like to get an update, the schools that kept iReady for reading or math. It tests the students in Spanish, but all the lessons are in English. So they're asking me why I voted to approve that without that piece. I said, I don't know, I'll go ask everybody why we approved that.
So
And then
report,
I
I
would
can
like a
address
flag
that.
report because we're not doing it. And we need to figure out what we're doing because we're paying it, it's money. We have people waiting to be trained. The San Diego County Office of Education wants to train our teachers. They're being told, oh, no, you can't come here and train our teachers. And our teachers are saying things to me like, this is just the same old Vista Rose. This is how we always used to do things. So I would like to get that and talk about that.
flag report.
Sure.
All right. Anything else?
That was,
All right.
Yeah.
And then, 18B, board members' reports or comments.
yeah, I got some more, but I didn't put in that list. So I've been having many retiree, teachers that are gonna retire at the end of this year. And they are being mandated to go to PD over 20 times out of their classroom. They don't want to, they're leaving at the end of the year, they want to teach their kids. So we're paying PD money to train people who are gonna be leaving, some of the trainings up in the spring, and they're gonna be leaving in a month. Why are we mandating these teachers who are retiring to go to this PD this year?
We can provide a report on that.
Okay, but really, like, why are we? We shouldn't be.
Trustee Smithfield, we
We'll talk-
cannot answer your questions now because it wasn't agendized. Let me explain. The purpose for
I'm just giving
agendizing,
you My comment,
just-
you can tell me later.
but I would like to respond to the rest of the board, President, if you would allow me.
Yes, go ahead.
When people ask for items to be discussed, but they're not agendized, there's a reason why we can't discuss them. We're required through the Brown Act to make sure our community is aware of a topic, because they may choose to come to be part of that conversation or to listen. So we are not saying that we're not willing to talk about it, we just have to follow the process that California has identified during the Open Meetings Act. We'd be happy to address that topic. We're not avoiding your answer, but it needs to be agendized in order for us to talk about it.
So I never asked for us to talk about it tonight. I said it was a comment that we need to think about. That's all I said. I never said, let's have a discussion.
It was my understanding you asked for reports. You said you had 5 reports.
I didn't ask for a report. We're on the next item.
Okay. Simply trying to respond to your requests.
Anyone? All right, seeing none, we'll go 15C, reflections. Right, seeing none, our next regular board meeting is going to be Thursday, October 3rd. This meeting is adjourned at 8:00.